When watching the Rising of the Shield Hero, I find it more times than not that the scenes that have the most cut content in comparison to the light novels are fight scenes. I mean, we have these solid descriptions of some very dynamic encounters that really add to the intensity of the situation. Yet, the anime only seems to adapt a quarter of what the novels intend to portray from them, often missing out on some moments that may reinforce certain characters' motives or intentions for doing what they're doing. With episodes 17 and 18, we have two back-to-back fights, Fitoria vs Filo, then Naofumi vs Motoyasu, and both had not only significant action moments cut out, but also scenes that helped develop the way that combat works in the world, as well as the characters involved in it. So let's see what exactly that was in today's episode of Shield Hero Cut content. But first, this video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends, a brand new free-to-play collection RPG game with almost 10 million players who have downloaded the game within only 3 months. Not to mention the almost 200,000 reviews giving it a near-perfect score in the Play Store. It's got great graphics, strategic gameplay, huge boss fights, an amazing storyline, and over 400 champions for you to collect and personally customize. Out of which, my personal favorite is Sir Nicholas, cause who doesn't want to see Santa Claus wielding a frost sword while wearing Rudolph's antlers on his back? Now, what's great about this game is that there's something for everyone. Like, if competitive PvP and tournaments aren't your thing, then you can immerse yourself instead in the deep storyline. Personally, I'm more of a fan of the competitive aspect, which is why I find Raid's PvP modes and leaderboards all the more rewarding to climb. Anyway, the game is growing pretty quick, especially now that the new update is live, and there's the new player loyalty reward program, where you'll get a new daily login reward every day for 90 days. So go ahead and use the link in the description to download the game today, and you'll get 50,000 silver and a free epic champion as part of the new player program to get you started. Now, let's get back to the video. Episode 17, A Promise Made, covering chapters 25 to 26 from the manga and chapters 5 to 6 from the light novel's 4th volume. If you recall from last time, Naofumi had just met Fitoria, and he spent the night within the ruins of the previous hero's country. He awakes the next day to hear Melty bombarding Fitoria with all types of questions regarding her past. It's from this that we learn a bit of Filolial history. Fitoria once had to fight a creature known as the Griffin King, a man-made monster that became such a prominent predator in the skies that it wiped out all flying Filolials. We also hear of the time that she fought and slayed the Dragon King. Melty then proceeds to ask about a legendary holy sword that's said to be located somewhere in the Filolial Sanctuary. Fitoria is a bit unsure as to whether it's legendary or not, but she does know that some of the old hero's weapons are there, serving as a way to foreshadow the existence of other powerful weapons. Anyway, it's when they all sit down to eat that Fitoria imprisons Melty with her wind magic. The air became tense, and Raftalia could sense the same murderous intent that she felt from the night before. It was clear that Fitoria was taking the matter very seriously. Now, just as we saw in the anime, she gives her demands to Naofumi, then challenges Filo to a duel. Naofumi knew that Filo wouldn't stand a chance if Fitoria transformed into her Filolial form. But after stating that they had to fight in their human form, Naofumi gained a bit of hope that she might be able to win. After all, she did have the magically enchanted gloves from the weapon shop owner. Of course, Naofumi just didn't want to fight at all, but there didn't seem to be any other options, so all he could do was just sit back and watch. Even so, he decided that if Filo was ever in trouble, he would ignore the rules and jump in to help. Now, this is where things start to differentiate a lot from the manga and the light novel. In the manga, Fitoria was much more serious. It seemed as if she was really going to kill Melty if Filo couldn't prove her worth. Like, every time Filo would attack and ultimately fail, the cage Melty was in would shrink a little bit more, causing her to have to hunch over to prevent herself from being cut. It applied a lot more pressure to the situation. Still though, Filo couldn't do a thing. Fitoria even let her land a free hit, but she was completely unfazed by it. She literally took no damage because on impact there were sparks, which if you remember from episode 1, that's the indicator to show that an attack has had zero effect on the target. It was after seeing this that Naofumi wondered just how strong Fitoria had to be to completely ignore an attack from the strongest member in his party. And to further showcase this difference in strength, Fitoria wound up a punch for a counterattack, but she didn't let it hit Filo. Instead, it was the wind from the raw power of the punch that ended up shredding Filo's magical clothing. Clearly, things weren't going well, and Fitoria hadn't even started using her main skills, one of which was the interruption magic that she used on Filo's wind spells. This was something that Naofumi had only read about. It was possible in theory, but in order for it to work, you had to have a deep understanding of your opponent's nature. You needed to analyze and understand the pattern of magic that was being cast. Once that was done, all you had to do was send out magic of the opposite pattern to counteract the incoming attack. Because high-level magic took a long time to be cast, those were easier to block. But mid to low tier magic where casting time was quite fast made interruption magic very difficult to use against. So seeing Fitoria use it with ease against Filo's mid-tier spells was actually quite impressive. She then opened her wings to the sky and took a deep breath. A weird aura began encircling her, and it became clear that she was gathering the magical elements to herself. Filo tried to copy, but she was too slow, and Fitoria had already absorbed all the magic to make her punches that much more powerful. She gave hit after hit before finally knocking Filo back into a wall of wind. Filo didn't give up though. She got back up, whole body trembling, and started to gather the magic around her once again. This time she was able to get enough, and quickly moved in for an attack. She rushed forward with a strong current of wind carrying her, causing her to move faster than Naofumi had ever seen her move before. It was almost like a bullet as she began to spin in the air, making a sharp point towards the front of her attack. On impact, Fitoria's clothes became covered with fine little cuts, but it was the scratch on her cheek that made Fitoria smile. Finally, an attack had gotten through. That's when Naofumi realized that Fitoria was just playing with them, putting on an act to see how Filo would react when faced with a superior opponent. That's why she was happy when Filo was able to overcome such overwhelming force. But the fight wasn't over just yet. Fitoria decided to bring things up another notch, and as the two continued to trade blows, a clear pattern could be seen. Fitoria would engage Filo with a different attack each time. Then Filo would be given a moment to recover and eventually counterattack. Naturally, Filo would attempt to mimic the attack that Fitoria just did, and sometimes they'd even seem to have a solid impact. So it was clear Fitoria was teaching Filo, teaching her how to fight in her human form, because although her Filolial form is stronger, it is only limited to kicks and makes Filo a bigger target. With these new quick attacks and claw strikes that she's learning, she could start to hold her own as a human as well. That was the purpose of this exercise. Eventually, the fight came to a point where Filo couldn't even muster up enough energy to maintain her claws, but by then, Fitoria had seen enough. The test had been passed. However, this wasn't just a test of Filo's strength. We learned that this was also a test of Naofumi's potential. You see, the way Filo fought for Naofumi's sake showed that Fitoria could trust Naofumi as a person. Filo's willingness to continuously fight in the face of overwhelming odds was a reflection of the person who raised her, which is why Fitoria now felt that Naofumi could be useful after all. Fitoria then grants Filo the title of heir to the Filolial Queen, and forcibly unlocks the entire Filolial series in Naofumi's shield. There were many shields that were unlocked, but it was the Filolial shield that caught Naofumi's eye since it gave a pretty interesting equip bonus. Aside from some power and growth adjustments, there was one that seemed really useful, called Ability While Riding. This meant that Filo could fight even better if someone was riding her. Unfortunately though, he still wasn't a high enough level to be able to use this shield. Now, with Filo declared as Fitoria's successor, all the Filolials have a big celebration that leads into the night. It's only after everything's settled down that Fitoria and Naofumi have their little one-on-one chat. As Fitoria asks if Naofumi even tried to clear his name, he thinks about the scenario from an outsider's perspective. What if he was in Renner Itsuki's shoes? Who would he believe? The supposed victim or the one being accused? It was obvious that if the person being accused was a complete stranger, then he'd likely side with the victim every time. He knew this because there's times where similar scenarios have taken place in the real world. He recalled a time when he was riding the train. A woman grabbed a man's arm, then shouted that that man had touched her. Even if he didn't do it, everyone would still look at him suspiciously, and his social status was now permanently damaged regardless of whether he could prove he did or didn't. Naofumi was pretty much in the same boat, but it wasn't a totally one-sided situation anymore. Ren and Itsuki seemed to be wavering on who they thought was right, so Naofumi felt that he might have an opportunity to talk things out and clear his name. This was the turning point for Naofumi. Seeing that Fitoria could have easily wiped him and the other heroes out at any given time made him want to show her that she wasn't misplacing her faith in them. Fitoria then shares a piece of information about the waves that wasn't shared in the anime. Apparently, hourglasses aren't just within major cities. They're spread all over the world, and Fitoria is responsible for defending the areas where there is no kingdom to fight back. Naofumi wanted to help her too, but they both knew that he was just too weak right now. He needed to get stronger. In order to do that, Fitoria gave him a blessing to slow down the Shield of Rage's corrosion. It changed the dragon core that was infused into his armor into something similar to that of the yin-yang, and the exact buffs he was given can be seen from this panel here. Now, as their discussion leads on, we get into the choice of saving the world or its people. Fitoria spoke as if she knew that this was what all paths led to, an inevitable truth that must be faced by all generations of heroes. She also spoke as if she was all alone, like she was standing on the edge of the world, looking into a never-ending abyss. Naofumi wondered just how long Fitoria had been doing this. She seemed indifferent to the outcome. Be it the world or the people, she couldn't even be bothered. It was as if the only thing still latching her to this world was the orders left behind by the previous shield hero. She rested her head on Naofumi's lap and proceeded to fall asleep. It seemed that she was able to gain at least a little bit of comfort from it. As Naofumi's eyes started to feel heavy himself, he wondered if this was how Filo would turn out after he's gone, contemplating all the things that Fitoria must have experienced to become this way, and hoping Filo wouldn't have to be put through the same. Which brings us now to the end of episode 17. Episode 18 starts in the next morning, with Fitoria teleporting them back to where they fought the tyrant Dragon Rex. In the manga, they were actually teleported right in front of the border gates where Motoyasu was, which kind of implies that Fitoria knows the exact locations of the heroes, but that's not necessarily true. She can actually only sense their presence. In order to locate them, she has to send out Filolials to scout out different areas. Anyway, Fitoria gives them a wooden carriage, and they use it to head towards the southwestern border, eventually reaching a crossing that was slightly less defended than all the others. But in the distance, Naofumi could spot Motoyasu and Mine. This was the last person that Naofumi wanted to try negotiating with, since Mine was there to persuade Motoyasu against anything that Naofumi would say. But finding another path would take days, and right now, their goal was standing right in front of them, so they really had no other choice. They approach the gates like in the anime, but instead of starting with a brief conversation, Motoyasu doesn't even say a word, and he quickly engages with a combo attack. You see, they were waiting for this. Mine was in a position that allowed her to cast White Fire on Motoyasu's spear. He then casted Airstrike Javelin, creating the combo Airstrike Fire Lance, and he launched that spear of fire right towards Filo before any of them could even get off the carriage. Naofumi tried to block it with Airstrike Shield and Second Shield, but the attack was too powerful. Melty and Raftalia had to bail, and Naofumi and Filo dodged to the side. This was the first time that Naofumi had seen magic and skills used together to create a new attack. Naofumi yelled at Motoyasu, demanding to know why he was just attacked. But once again, Motoyasu didn't say a word. Instead, he got Mine to activate the trap called Lightning Cage, a magical device that's used against wizards and magic casters to act as a prison cell. In this case, it not only got rid of their escape route, but it also limited Filo's movement since the area within it was so small. With everything now in place, Motoyasu prepped himself for battle. Naofumi tried one more time to negotiate, but Motoyasu was done listening. In fact, he never even started. Just like in the book Naofumi read in episode 1, the spear hero was too loyal to have distrust in the ones that he thought as close friends. It also didn't help that he believed Ren and Itsuki to be slain by Naofumi. So talking was over, and at this point, neither of them were going to hold back. It was clear from the expression on Motoyasu's face that he wouldn't be satisfied until Naofumi was dead at his feet. Naofumi could sense this, so he switched to the Chimera Viper shield and had Filo stand next to him to hold the front line. Meanwhile, Raftalia was to protect Melty in the back. On the other side, Motoyasu just had Mine and the two girls from his party. So, all in all, it was a 4v4 to finally settle the rivalry between the spear and the shield. Filo was ordered to handle Motoyasu, hoping that he would restrain himself since she was just a girl. However, this time there was none of that. Initially, Filo had the upper hand, using the new move she learned from Fitoria to catch Motoyasu off guard. He had to respond with a spear skill of his own, Shooting Star Spear, which Naofumi had to jump in to block. The impact reverberated through Naofumi's bones, and he could feel the difference in strength from that one move. Motoyasu followed it up with a barrage of attacks that were so quick that the Chimera Viper shield couldn't even activate its Snake Fang effect to counter. Then what followed after that was even more powerful. His airstrike burst flare lance combo hit like a truck, and every area that the shield didn't cover felt extreme bits of pain. He thought he only survived the attack thanks to Fitoria's protection. Even so though, he was now bleeding through his armor, and Motoyasu wasn't going to give him a chance to recover. Naofumi tried to give himself time by hiding in his shield prison, but Motoyasu quickly countered it with his windmill skill. Seeing that Naofumi was in trouble, Filo rushed in again to re-engage her primary target, and this time, she had first guard buffing her defense. It was thanks to that she was able to parry Motoyasu's spear away, and it gave Naofumi a chance to grab a hold of his arm. Motoyasu was now stuck in place, allowing Filo to use high quick and get a few good hits in before Naofumi's grasp finally broke. Neither hero was faltering, and neither were their party members. Melty was focused on disabling the lightning cage, while mine and the other casters were restoring their magic via potions. Raphtalia had gone all stealth mode to try to find the best opportunity to strike, leaving Filo responsible for protecting Melty while she worked. Eventually, Raphtalia hints at the idea to use a combo of their own. A combination of the first hiding spell and the hiding shield skill, which created an invisible shield in front of Raphtalia. Then by casting Chain Shield, it turned the invisible shield into the Soul Eater shield, causing it to trigger on the nearest target and steal SP away from Motoyasu. Motoyasu didn't care though. He charged in with a Shooting Star Spear attack, but having seen this move numerous times before, Naofumi easily grabs the tip of the spear, giving Snakebite an opportunity to counterattack and poison Motoyasu. Though he was only briefly incapacitated, as he made a gesture that released medicine from his spear, which acted as an antidote to the poison. Even if he was healed, he was still in pretty bad shape, and it was clear that Naofumi now had the upper hand. But Motoyasu still refused to listen to anything that he had to say. It seemed the only remaining option then was to just defeat him. That's when Naofumi gets Filo and Melty to do a magical combo of their own. Not to be confused with the combo skills that we just watched. Combo magic was something different. It's an advanced technique that requires the cooperation of two skilled magic casters. They would combine their powers to create a more complicated spell. So base magic was for individual casters, combo magic was for a couple, and ranking above that was ceremony magic. But that was only used in wars to cast highly powerful spells. The combo magic in this case was Typhoon. Motoyasu tried to defend against it, but the spell was too strong and it sent him flying. Surely you'd think the fight would be over now, but Motoyasu still got back up. He refused to let down his so-called friends, and Naofumi saw this. He even began to acknowledge it as one of Motoyasu's few redeemable qualities. He thought maybe he really was just a hopeless idiot with endless trust in his allies. Regardless, the fight wouldn't end until someone fell. So Naofumi got Filo to prepare the final blow, while Melty returned to deactivating the lightning cage and Raphtalia kept watch over mine. All that was left now was to give the order. It was actually kind of sad. Motoyasu had the real enemy next to him this entire time, yet didn't know, and likely didn't want to know. But before Filo was about to finish the fight, Naofumi looked around and he noticed something strange. All the soldiers that once surrounded them were now gone. Then, out of nowhere, a voice could be heard alongside a faint clapping, followed by an ominous presence that was so powerful that it was almost suffocating. You see, before casting the judgment spell, the Pope had already revealed himself. He applauded Motoyasu for his unyielding resolve, and thanked him for keeping Naofumi occupied. That's when Filo realized that they were about to be attacked, and just as we saw, they barely made it out unscathed. Naofumi blocked most of the blast, while Filo used her wings to protect everyone else from what remained. And yeah, that did include Motoyasu and mine. What's interesting to note though was that even though the Shield of Rage was active, Filo didn't go into her rage mode. It seemed like Fitoria's Ahoge prevented it from happening. Naofumi now had yet another thing to thank Fitoria for, but he couldn't help but wonder why Filo went out of her way to protect Motoyasu and mine. I mean, had she not kicked them towards him and covered them with her wings, they surely wouldn't have made it out of that alive. He thought, why did it matter if Motoyasu was saved or not if two of the other heroes were dead already? To Naofumi, Motoyasu dying in that blast would have just been a good riddance. But that wasn't his main concern right now. The main problem was standing above them. In typical villainy fashion, rather than simply bombard his remaining targets with attacks, the priest gives his whole monologue as to what he's doing and why he's doing it, chalking it up to the heroes being a detriment to society and to the faith of the people. So, as a servant of God, it's his duty as the Pope to eliminate them. We know very well what the priest's plan was, and after revealing his intentions to them, Motoyasu quickly turns to Naofumi and pleads with him to start a truce. Naofumi was a little bit surprised at Motoyasu's quick 180. It was as if he couldn't even understand all the hardships that he put him through. So Naofumi just brushed off his requests. He felt no responsibility whatsoever to help him. He even went so far as to straight up tell him to just die. This angered Motoyasu, and he looked like he was going in for a punch, but if that happened, the Shield of Rage would have triggered and likely killed Motoyasu, given how weakened he was at that moment. The only reason that Naofumi prevented this from happening was because the area of effect damage from his shield could also hit his own party, and he didn't really want that to happen. Meanwhile, the priest mocked their bickering in the distance, grinning at the discourse between the heroes. He then called for his weapon, which Melty quickly identified as a relic from the past, a replica of the weapons used by the legendary heroes, bringing us to the end of episode 18 and to the end of this cut content. I think this episode in particular really highlights what I was talking about at the beginning of the video. It's not like any of the information I shared was essential to the progression of the story, but it does highlight various aspects of Fitoria and Motoyasu's character that allows us to understand their motives a little bit better. We also got to learn about some new mechanics related to this world's magic, which in my opinion is never not fun to discover. Anyway, with the Shield Hero anime now done, I'm going to be slowing down on the Shield Hero cut content and start ramping up into some current series, starting with Early Furuta next week and Danmachi for the week after. So be sure to check those out and let me know which of the two that you prefer. But as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So until next time, ciao!